Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Welcome, welcome. Ahankara, party time. Every week fewer and fewer people come. I think the ahankara is, for some people, just too much. It's flattened to the ground. So, anyway, welcome to the brave souls who are at Ahankara Party 9. So today...
It seems like it's working very well.
Thank you for being here, Purushottam. Okay, so today we're going to review what we talked about last week. And then today we're going to talk about two ahankara characteristics, blames and rationalizes, because they go together. Okay, and then we're going to play the blame game. Okay, so last week we talked about this characteristic of lack of self-awareness for ahankara, right? And remember, that's the kind of the failure to see beyond our own thoughts. In other words, you can't see how you affect someone else at all, you know? You're just in your own head, your own thoughts, your own feelings, right? You can't grasp the impact of how you make people feel, basically. So that's the kind of the nutshell. And then when you have low self-awareness, you act very impulsively. You know, you just act on your feeling. Just like I always give the example like a dog. If you kick a dog, it's going to bite you. So if you say something mean to somebody who has low self-awareness, they don't think like, how might what I say or do right in this moment affect that person and maybe potentially ruin our whole relationship forever? Because people can't forget, you know, especially what you say, right? So emotions kind of, they get the better of us and they make us make these kind of selfish, impulsive decisions, basically, right? Just to pacify our feelings so we could get a relief from that overwhelming, impulsive feeling. Is there something wrong, Vila? No? Okay, and remember this little factoid, the fun factoid from last week, that only 10 to 15% of people actually are as self-aware as they think they are. That's very low. That means like maybe 1 out of 10 people say like, I'm self-aware and I'm this self-aware, however that's measured, I'm not sure, but then they actually give some sort of test to see, and only 1 out of 10 actually match with their own assessment. So that's kind of scary in a way. Okay. Also, remember we did 11 signs that a person is lacking self-awareness? And then at the end we did this experiment with the cat pooping in the litter box, and like, what would you say to the cat? And we were like, wow, this is like a bed of fresh roses, right? If you want to say the right thing to the cat, you'd say something like, give it a compliment anyway, unless you want to spend time and that's fun for you. Some people actually like to argue. You know, on my father's side of the family, it was like his... not his generation, but his father's generation, they like to argue. I mean, even if he just asked a question, it was like an argumentative type of question every time. Like, how are you? I'm like, oh, you know, like, I kind of feel like no matter what I'm going to say, you're going to get in a fight with me, you know? So some people actually enjoy it, and I think it's a way that they express like their love for each other, is like, or that you care about that person, that you're going to argue the point to the death, you know? So for me, you know, I don't care for that. I think it's like an ahankara game, really, right? So who can prove, you know? But anyway, so these are all the different signs of the lack of self-awareness, right? That they always have to be the center of attention. They believe they're always right. They frequently make negative or critical comments. They always have to be in control. They're always the victim of some bad person who did them wrong. You know, it's always somebody did something to me. You know, I, of course, was this perfect angel. I didn't do anything to cause this. It's just out of the blue, this person did this to me. Can you believe it? That's how it feels when they're talking to you, you know. They act without thinking of the consequences, and they later might, I'm not even going to say they do regret it, potentially they might regret it, because they'd have to admit that they actually did something wrong. So that's the big hurdle to get over. They find it difficult to empathize with others and thus cause problems in relationships, right? Because they don't see how what they did would upset somebody. They can't get in the shoes. So this is the type of person in therapy who every week I have to decode it for them. You know, it's like they don't understand what they did and why. So I'm like, well, let's think about it like this. And I try to like give exercises, but if they can't get it, you know, then I have to say, well, can you imagine the person might have felt this? And they're like, oh, really? You know, so then what should I do? But see, that means that they didn't feel anything. That means that you told them a fact of how something might, not a fact, but of how the person might have responded, but they didn't feel anything. So now they just want you to tell you the next step. Now what should I do? Please help me. She's mad at me. What should I do? And it's like, okay, well, you could consider this. No way, I'm not going to do that. Okay, see you next week. You know, then we try again. whatever. But it's, the whole idea of therapy is, people who are coming to therapy oftentimes have these types of 11 issues. They're not self-aware, so the therapist is trying to help flex their self-awareness muscles, help them to get it. And it's no fault of the person coming, actually. It's because their mother most likely was not attuned to them and didn't help them, see themselves. So now the role of the therapist is to help with that. So I'm not trying to make a joke, because it's not a joke, but sometimes if you repeatedly get, it can become funny in a way, even with the client. Sometimes we laugh about it, because it's like, oh, shoot, I didn't see that again. Okay, So also they're not able to identify how others perceive them. So not only how they affect someone else, but they're also, lack of self-awareness means how someone perceives you. So that's why if someone has a very high lack of self-awareness and the therapist tells them something directly, they freak out. It's like, oh my God, I have blonde hair? It's like, yeah, you do, and we all see it, and we've all been seeing it. Like, what? I thought I had black hair or something. In other words, sometimes it's that obvious, but they don't see it, and so then they get a shock. They get very, and they also are coming to therapy because they don't trust typically their mother or father at the core. So then they're not going to trust the therapist, And then so the therapist has to do this dance of being, basically pacifying their ahankara and saying nice things. And eventually, if the therapist can gauge it right, that this person might start trusting them, then the therapist can give a little injection of some poison, basically, how they'll feel is poison, so the person can hear it. And if they trust, if the therapist trusts, if the client trusts the therapist enough, maybe, just maybe, they'll hear it. They'll hear it and they'll say, yeah, this person I think does have my best interest at heart. Just maybe I'll consider what they're saying, But sometimes it's very hard to gauge it. It's an art at that point, It's not a science, it's an art. And so sometimes then the client will get triggered and twist it somehow that now you're abusing me, now you're mean to me, now you rejected me, now, so then you have to try to do damage control and repair, and sometimes it can be repaired and sometimes it can't. And sometimes it's actually healthy for it to end. And for both, for the client to digest and say, okay, what worked for me in that relationship, what didn't, and then find another type of healing person, maybe therapist, to continue the path with them. So anyway, that's just a little notes from the office of life in therapy. Some of you may have experienced things like this. Okay, so then we talked about how to deal with people who lack self-awareness, right? So we want to, the punchline is feed the ahankara its food. Just give them the praise or give them what they want to hear. You're not going to win that battle, So when the ahankara is flared up, don't try to teach them what to do or try to help them see the light, help them see, what they need to see. Or there's another thing called caretaking their feelings. Don't try to say, oh, he's so sad, I'm going to try to explain this to him and her until they can feel happy. It's not your job to be their co-pilot in their life and be navigating for them. Therapists don't even do that, actually. Therapists aren't even supposed to do that. You're supposed to actually give them the tools to figure it out themselves. So in codependency and some other types of issues, we try to kind of suffocate or control the person too much, And it can come out as just trying to help, but really you keep working with them because actually in a very subtle way you're getting something out of that. You're feeling good, oh, I'm needed, I'm important, I'm a healer, But really you're sabotaging your own things you need to do for your life, for your health. It's definitely, you don't want to tell them the truth about themselves, It's very shocking to hear that when someone tells you the truth, right? And some of the experiments we've done, we see that. It doesn't feel good. Okay, so we've done so many of these. We've done lacks awareness, hates, loves, competitive, criticizes others, praises self, insensitive. And now today we're going to do this rationalizes and blames together. And actually, all of these relate. You start seeing, wait a minute, that sounds like that one too, and that sounds like that one too. And that's good that we're being redundant with, we're going over and over the same points. Then it becomes more a deeper samskara in you, so you can see it in yourself and others more easily if we keep going over the points, So let's see these two. So this characteristic of blame, right? Blame, what is it? It's assigning responsibility to someone or something else about something bad that's happened, right? So it's not a good thing. Blame, that's not a good connotation, right? So I'm not going to just say you gave me a compliment. I'm not going to blame you and be like, oh my God, Janava is always praising me. Can you imagine? Or Janava is always giving me, every time I see her, she gives me $1,000. She's so annoying. That's not, right? I'm not going to blame you, So we blame when it's something bad, something negative, So that's interesting to see that. And what we call it in psychology is a cognitive distortion, right? So it's a trick of the mind, The ahankara, once again, our friend the ahankara, convinces us of something that's not true. Like the cat, look at the cat, thinks he's Superman and he can fly, He probably can't even jump 1 inch, but there he is, Superman, right? So blaming is one of the most widespread cognitive distortions. A cognitive distortion is something's not right in your mind. The way you're seeing things is not right, You're thinking things in an incorrect way. And it can be very destructive because we believe it. The ahankara really makes us believe everything that we're thinking is true and that we're right, And remember, ahankara gives us the agency to act. So that's scary, Manas doesn't. Manas is just like, dislike. It's just like whining and complaining, But then ahankara is like, you dislike that? Well, let's go do something about it. Come on, let's go right now, Ahankara is like, let's go. And it can be very destructive because of that. Because you have this distortion of something that's not true, and then you're acting on it like it's true, and you might act on it in a very forceful way. So here's blame, kind of boiled down. If it's bad, I didn't do it, you did it. And if it's something good, oh, I did it. Have you guys had that experience before where you did something really good, like you worked really hard, or you thought of some really creative idea, or you did something, or you gave some money, you did something, and then somebody else took credit for it? That feels so bad, right? When you invest time, you invest money, and then somebody just takes it away, and then they act like they did it? Or they don't act like they did it, but they don't acknowledge you at all, that you weren't involved at all, So that's the ahankara. The ahankara likes to, be seen as doing the good thing. That's how we see ourselves. We're the good one, and we're the right one, and we're the kind and generous and smart and all the good qualities you can think of. That's us, So as soon as it's good, it's me, And sometimes it's like, if you have a group of people, just say a team that you're managing, everybody on the team thinks they're the one, like they did the most. But really each person, you kind of need each person, even if one person, it took them 5 hours for their part, and another person, maybe it only took them 15 minutes. But that's a really critical thing they did, So, but each person is like, well, if it wasn't for me in those 15 minutes, I'm the one who, paid for the whole event. And then someone else is like, well, for 5 hours, I'm the one who rolled up my sleeves and did the hard work, paid for the event, please. The other one's like, I did the hard work, please, So because of our ahankara, we're always the one who did the good thing, and we're always the number one who did the good thing. So just say we know there's other people who did the good things. We're always the first one who did the good thing, the best, and the most important, But if it's bad, immediately, I didn't do that, Immediately, that wasn't me, So that's the first part. Blame is just like, I did it if it's good, and I didn't do it if it's bad. And he did it if it's bad, or she did it, okay? Or something else, but God forbid, not me. So then the next thing is rationalization, okay? So rationalization, comes from the American Psychological Association. This is how they're defining it, okay? So they say it's an ego defense in which apparently logical reasons are given to justify unacceptable behavior. Okay, so in this picture, this is someone slapping, it looks like maybe they're in a fight, a couple. It looks like the man's, punching or slapping the woman. And I bet if we sat down and interviewed him, he would definitely say that she deserved it. Like, she shouldn't have talked to me like that. Where does she get off doing that? She does, if you interview someone, and this was, when I worked with parents and children at this psychiatric hospital, and you're interviewing the parents, they're not going to say that, they say he shouldn't have been doing that. The kid shouldn't have been doing that. Of course he deserves a slap. Next time I'm going to, kick him. It's like, oh, okay. Thanks for sharing, It's very hard to bend the ahankara to see the other person's point of view. But so anyway, so this is an ego defense, right? Even the American, Psychological Association is talking about ahankara. It's an ahankara defense. As soon as there's some unacceptable behavior, we have many, many reasons. And it's very funny if you see other people doing it, but it's hard to see our own because it feels so right. It's very hard to see our own and be like, is that really my ahankara? No, it's not my ahankara. Of course I should have the extra chocolate bar even though I'm on a diet. It's Sunday, or whatever. There's always some rationalization we can make, and it just does it all the time. Just like all the other things we've seen with ahankara, it's just its nature. It's an unconscious, automatic thing of rationalizing and blaming. Rationalizing and blaming. So this rationalizing, what we said is a defense mechanism. So you see this lady, it looks like maybe that's the husband, and it looks like she just went shopping and she has about maybe 6 bags there. She probably had a splurge at the mall, right? And the husband's like, are you kidding me? We're on a budget. Like, you just drained the account, But, what do you think she probably said? What would be her reason, do you think? Because she's got a rationalization. She doesn't look worried. She's like, whatever, What do you think she would say? What would her rationalization be? Malati?
This is the first time in the last 3 months that I'm shopping, and really, I've waited for so long, so finally, I deserve getting something nice.
Perfect. Yeah. It's been 3 months, haven't you noticed, Yeah, it's been 3 months I've been waiting, and finally I'm getting some stuff, and now you're criticizing me? That's so rude. Right? What else? Gargamuni?
You just 2 years ago bought a new car. What about that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Right? Just throwing it back on him. A new car. I barely spent anything. You got a whole new car for yourself, and I'm still driving this 2-year-old car, or 3-year-old car. Jaya, were you going to say something?
I was also just thinking, like, I can see I have nothing to wear.
I have nothing to wear. What else? Any other ideas on how she'd rationalize?
Yeah, I would say I bought all this thing for the whole family. What's so hard to keep everything for the family?
That's very good, right? I get no respect around here, no appreciation. You don't even know what's in these bags. I was buying stuff for the whole family. Good one. And then you look in there and there's one bag with pair of socks for the family. And then she has silk blouses for herself. Right? So good, you guys. Or she could have said, I bought everything on sale. What's wrong? I got this. I couldn't wait another month because the sale's now. I know I blew the budget, but I got everything on a discount. And he's like, oh my God, 50% off, There's millions of excuses or rationalizations. You got one, Yanishri? Hema? Okay.
Yes, I'm spoiling myself. What's wrong with me spoiling myself?
Ooh, good one, right? This is my self-care. My therapist told me I should do self-care. So this is it. Good one, very good. See how many we can think of that fast, right? And our mind is doing it all the time. If you watch yourself, you'll have a comedy show just on all the rationalizations we do of your own ahankara, So here's how they called it, what a defense mechanism is. It's an unconscious reaction pattern, right? Meaning that we have a whole set of things that are in the chitta there that just pop up. So we always have a good excuse all the time, right? And it's employed by our friend the ahankara to protect itself from the anxiety that will arise from being faced with a threat to our identity. In other words, she wasn't rationalizing probably when she was buying the stuff. But as soon as he said something like, what the hell are you thinking? 6 bags, we're on a budget, Then all of a sudden this whole unconscious pattern will come and all the excuses will start coming, So she can be in her perfect position of always right and perfect, flawless. Okay. So why do we rationalize? So they're used to defend against feelings of guilt or shame, to maintain self-respect, and to protect ourselves from criticism. And shame is something, there's some psychologists, and that's all they study. They literally write articles and books and make videos just on shame, because it's such a very deep and painful emotion. It's shame. And it comes way back, at the very beginning when we're getting potty trained. There's a lot of research on that. And I work with a lot of my clients who have young kids on how to potty train. Potty train means go to the bathroom, when you're learning how to use the toilet. There's a lot of shame around that. Some kids, it just takes longer. And the parents get very frustrated, and they take it out on the kid. And so the kid gets, because when you're learning how to become independent, one of the major steps is going to the bathroom. And so if you wet the bed, or if you do not, know how to, you may have some accidents and you're wearing underwear instead of the diaper, and you have some accidents, the parents can take it out on you. Their frustration basically of not being a good parent, not being a patient parent. It's not your fault, however long it takes is actually your own nature as well. It's part of your disposition, and it's also part of how the parents parent you. But sometimes the parents get so angry and so stressed, the kid will get constipated, they won't go to the bathroom, they'll hold it, and then they have accidents and the parents get more mad, and then there's a whole drama around potty training for a lot of kids. So there's a lot of shame around that. And we don't know, we don't remember because we were like very young when this chapter happened. You know what I mean? So, but what happens is, then as an adult, the lady is just coming back from shopping, and the husband's like, what were you thinking? You should have known better. And that can trigger the samskara of shame for being bad from when they might have been so young, So it's very interesting how these samskaras work with, she shouldn't really feel ashamed from shopping, right? And by her husband saying that, but the shame from so long ago that was so deep and so unbearable can come into this with the husband, and then she starts getting defensive to not feel that feeling of shame, and says, well, you did this, you bought the car, Okay. So a little bit more about rationalizing. So in psychotherapy, rationalization is considered counterproductive to deep exploration and confrontation of the client's thoughts and feelings and their effect on behavior. In other words, rationalization could be seen, like we've said so far up until this slide, as a defense mechanism. In other words, maybe it's a good thing, so you don't have to feel that shame. It's like a protective barrier that you kind of, make an excuse or blame somebody else, so you don't have to feel it. But actually, in therapy, the whole idea is to feel that stuff, so we can get rid of that samskara, So I just wanted to make a note of that. It's a good thing if you feel it and you're in therapy with your therapist and going, oh my God, I'm feeling ashamed now. It's like, yes, okay, let's work with that. We're getting to the core. Okay, so in modern psychology terms, it's called projection, right? Where you shift the blame. You see this picture of the guy? He wants to be seen as like peace and love and sunshine, and it's always happy. Everything's always good. But what's his shadow side, or the unconscious, the chitta part that he's trying to cover, those samskaras, or, he looks like he has some anger, depression maybe, feeling bad about himself, right? Negative feelings about himself. That all he's trying to cover, So what happens is the part that he doesn't like about himself, and we all have a certain parts that we don't like about ourselves, that's the part that we project on someone else. So we're seeing them almost as they'll trigger something in us, but we're projecting the part that we hate about ourselves on another person. And that's a very interesting trick that ahankara does. So it's when we're actually attributing our shortcomings, our mistakes, our shame, our flaws onto someone else in order to protect ourselves, our ahankara. Of course, nobody knows they're doing that, But that's actually what happens sometimes. And that's to protect our perfect image, of ourselves. So here's typical recipients of blame. Number one, the dog. I think a lot of reasons maybe why people have dogs is they say man's best friend, but also whenever there's a problem, you can blame it on the dog, The dog ate my homework, the dog did it, the dog made the mess, the dog, and if it's a couple and they're fighting, it's like the dog did it. I didn't do it. I didn't eat your donut that you left on the table, the dog did that. The weather, a lot of times it's like, no, it was because, it's raining, so I don't feel like coming. It's like, how does that have to, okay. But if you actually really wanted to come somewhere, you would walk through like a thunderstorm to get there. But it's a convenient thing to blame it on the weather, I'm not saying it's not harder to get there in the rain, but it's a convenient excuse. Instead of saying, I'm tired, I don't feel like coming. It's easier to say, but it was raining, With the traffic, that's a great one, right? I used that last week too. Oh, there's traffic. I'm late because there's traffic. It's like, okay. Or, you left too late? Could that be part of it? No, that's not it. Okay, it's just the traffic. Astrology, it's like, well, the stars had aligned this way, and that's why. That's why. It's like, okay, that's fine. I believe in astrology too, but is it always astrology? Can you take any responsibility at all? For anything that you did, No, past life. That's my favorite. When people come to therapy and they say, could this be a past life thing? I'm like, I'm sure it could, but what about this life? What's going on in this life? Like, do you know how much stuff did I see that we need to work on in this life? You got to book me for the next 10 years, okay? Then once we're all set with that, let's look at your past life. But because of the lack of self-awareness, they literally will come, they can't see one thing at all in this whole life that there's a problem on their side. unless they want to talk about someone else, you know. So they're like, it's him and it's her and it's her. I think it's a past life thing. Can we get into that? Can you do some past life regression? I'm like, no, I don't want to know about your past life. I'm up to here with this life right now. So past life is a famous one. God, right? God, why is God punishing me? God did this to me, you know. I can't believe he did this to me. Guru, right? The guru gets blamed a lot, right? Parents. So this is a little, you know, thing with therapy. Usually we have to see how you got that samskara made inside of you. How did that come to you? But then some people get stuck there. It's like a rut. We're like driving, and then now it's starting to get like a muddy road, you know, and then we're getting stuck on the road. That's when we start going into samskara land, right? And then we land on it, your dad, it's your dad. He did it, he did this and this and this too. And then you know what? They can't get the car out of the mud. So then they're just stuck. My dad, I can't believe what my dad did to me. My dad, my dad. But that's not the whole point of it. It's just to see how it got made in you so we can nurture your inner child and so we can say goodbye, Dad. You know, it's, you know, I understand your limitations and move on. So either people get stuck on my parents did it in therapy, or they keep going around my parents did it, you know, and they don't want to look at it and they're like, no, I forgive him. I'm like, how did you do that? Do you even know what he did to you? No, but I forgive him. And then they'll have some like cheap one-liner, like, you know, he was young, he didn't know any better. Okay, but we have to look at actually what imprint got made onto you and how it got made onto you. Why? Because if we don't figure that out, guess what's going to happen? Guess who you're going to think is nice and want to hang out with? The same type of person who hurt you in that way as your father. So you have to get your very crystal clear on what he did, how he did it, how it impacted you, so you can clear it. You know, but this is one where people get stuck on the parents, you know. Siblings is the best. I mean, like I said, I had 3 younger sisters. I had 3 people to pick from at all times to blame. And it just works so well for me. We didn't have a dog, but I had 3 sisters and we had some cats. So between that, there was always somebody. I could be like, he did it, she did it, you know, something. So siblings are good. Drugs and alcohol. I used to work at a drug addiction treatment center for alcoholics and drug addicts. And it was a residential center. This is after I worked at the one with the psychiatric hospital for kids and teens. I knew I was going to be going into private practice, so I said, all right, let me round it out. I didn't know how to deal with this type, so I purposely went to the center for that, to learn how to work with addiction. And these, every person basically who I saw, every addict, it was always like, I can't believe, you know, the alcohol did it basically to him. Or the drugs. It was never, I chose to do that. I chose, you know, and then the family also, what they call, the families are like enablers, right? So then the family would say, yeah, you know, they would actually bring him the alcohol and say, but it was his birthday. And it's like, yes, but he's an alcoholic. So the family would like, and say, but that's how I show my love, you know? So that's really hard. And then the alcoholic doesn't, one of the main way a person becomes an addict is they aren't self-aware and they don't take responsibility for their behavior, you know? And so a number of rationalizations is amazing, what you could hear in one day. You know, because I would meet with them hour after hour after hour, and I'd run groups with them, and all the different rationalizations were so intense. I mean, to get to the point that you can't function in your life, that you're on the street like almost dying, you know, from a drug overdose. How many rationalizations have you had to say to yourself to get to that point? You know, to leave like your wife and kid with no food and no money and all that. I mean, how many and so that's hard work in therapy to dig someone out of that. That is rationalizations to the max, you know. Your partner, it's your partner's fault, right? That's a favorite one. Either the dog or the partner, one of the two, right? The president, you know, it's Trump's fault. I actually had a client who came to me and said, I said, okay, why do you want to see me? And well, because Trump made me depressed. I'm like, oh, is he a relative? No. So you never talked to Trump before? No. I'm like, so you're coming to therapy because Trump made you depressed? And she's like, yeah. And we had like many sessions. And I'm like, can you see how Trump might be like your father? No. I'm like, okay. So people can come with any one to blame, you know, except for their own mind and their own some scars, you know. The system, that's another one. People come to therapy and say, this system, you know, and I'm like, so you're coming to therapy because it's the system. Yes, the way the system is working. How does it have to do with you? Like, how does it make you feel? Feelings? No, it's the system. Can we talk about the system? So they'll come and just talk about like some system that's not working. And I'm like, and so you're going to fix that system and all of a sudden you're going to feel better or something? Like the system is a good one. Teachers get blamed a lot, right? Like if you fail in a class or something, it's the teacher's fault, not yours, right? The teacher's a bad teacher. Now I'm not saying there aren't teachers who are, the teachers could be better, but what part is yours to own? Like if you have to take that class, get a tutor if the teacher's bad. Or, I don't know, get a different teacher. But instead it's like, no, I failed because the teacher was bad. Therapists get blamed a lot as well. I've explained that before, right? Your samskaras get projected onto the therapist. So if you're a female therapist, most likely your mother's samskara is going to get projected onto the female therapist. And if it's called transference, it just gets transferred right on. And then if you're a male therapist, the father's samskara is going to get projected right on. And sometimes people that I work with purposely will choose a therapist knowing that. Consciously saying, you know what, I have an issue with my dad. I want to work with a male because I want to have the experience of having a loving relationship with a male. Or I have an issue with my mom, so I want to have the experience of having a loving relationship with a female therapist who cares for me, to make a new samskara for that. So there's lots of ways you can work with it, but being aware of it is really important. It's hard to see in therapy, because you trust that person and then all of a sudden you don't. Something feels off, something feels wrong, and it's very unbelievable to think it's something my mom did to me 30 years ago that's making me doubt this person, And the last point, it's getting covered here, sorry, but it says anyone or anything other than yourself. The 15th, I gave a lot of ideas that I've heard from different people and different, people, but now this last one is, just in case, the category is anyone or anything at all except for you. That's typical recipients of blame. Okay, so who are experts at doing this thing called shifting the blame, right? Blaming other people or things instead of taking responsibility for, for our own self is most common among these types of people. It's not an exhaustive list, but this is what I see a lot in therapy. So one, people who lack self-awareness. We've talked about that before, right? If you can't see yourself, how can you take responsibility? So then you're going to blame the other. People who are experiencing negative feelings, like I mentioned before, shame, or inferiority, you have to quickly do something and blame so it can pull you back up again, People who aren't able to regulate their emotions, I mentioned that. So if you're not able to regulate and control your own feelings and you're about to snap, you just blame somebody. It's a quick and easy way, at least to throw it on them and have them react, and then you can breathe and go, oh, okay, they're reacting worse than me, great, People who have narcissistic or borderline traits or tendencies. One of the common problems with both of these disorders is that they can't see themselves. So they can't see themselves, and that's why they act in the ways as they do. So they're going to always shift the blame. They have almost a disease of not being able to take responsibility, these two types. Even if you tell them directly, this is what you did, this is how it made me feel, they can't get it. Also, people who are not able to take responsibility for their actions and their feelings. So this is another type. People who have a victim mentality, in other words, they've probably been pretty hurt in their childhood, so now they still are acting like that as an adult, like, you did this to me. And then I always say, like, okay, let me hear what they did. And then I try to hear it out, but then I say, and what was your part of that? And oftentimes they can't see it. So then I try to say, well, instead of me just telling them, I'm like, maybe you could ask that person, what did you do to trigger them to respond like that? You could have that dialogue. No, I can't ask them. So then I try to help them see, for every reaction you're getting, there's some sort of action you did. It's not random, That's very hard for some people to see who have this victim mentality. Also, unresolved childhood wounds. People who are afraid of the consequences of their behavior, right? So they'll just shift the blame. They can't deal with the consequences, or people who are in denial. Okay? So blaming, I'm trying to just put it very kind of in a nutshell because I'm trying to do two characteristics today, right? So blaming, I'm kind of thinking of it like blaming is like you assign the responsibility, like you did it. You did it or you didn't do it. Whatever you're supposed to do or not do, it's your fault. Like you did it, So something good, I did it, something bad, you did it. And then rationalizing is like giving reasons around it. So blaming is like, you did it, and then rationalizing is like, or I did it, and here's why, I'm trying to make it as succinct as possible. So some examples, right? So blame is kind of like, well, whose fault is it, And then rationalizing is and why. So the traffic, see, it's the traffic's fault. Traffic made me late, He got drunk because the alcohol was in the house. So what's the issue? If I'm sitting here, because every week I'd have to do family therapy with the addict and their family, And the family would be like, I'm like, so what's the answer to this problem? They're like, don't have alcohol in the house. That's fine. I mean, that's better than nothing. But the problem is actually the guy who is an addict. And if the alcohol's not in the house, guess what he's going to do? You think he's going to all of a sudden not be an alcoholic? No, he's going to get in his car and go to the local store and get the alcohol. So obviously it's a good idea not to have it in the house. That's very tempting. But also there's more to the story. And the families think the answer is like that. And same with the alcoholic. And they're so confident in it too. They're like, please just discharge me. I'm going to be fine. I understand now, because they hate being at this place. They're detoxing. It's so boring. They can't get their fix. They have to deal with their feelings, So they say all these things to convince you. So amazing, actually, how they can convince to get the hell out of there, And they go back and they do it again unless they realize the problem is in them, related to their samskar from usually some very horrible thing that happened in their childhood. That's what it always comes back to, at least in my experience. Here's one. My past life connection with my neighbor made me cheat on my wife. That's why, I had this past life connection. My neighbor, we knew each other from past life. It was so strong. It was just magnetic. And so that's why I didn't want to do it. My past life connection made me do it. It's true. Next one. Why did God punish me like this? Why did he do this to me? That one comes up a lot in therapy for people who are religious. They're not necessarily on the path of bhakti yoga, but they're religious, and they have very terrible things happen in their life, like they lose a child or something, and they're like, how could God be so cruel to me, So that's it. Automatically, the ahankara will blame. President Trump made me depressed. I already shared that one with you. My partner made me go to this party. When people say things what the partner made them do, I'm like, are you 2 years old? Oh, I'm sorry, you're 35? And your partner made you do it? Why didn't you say no? But this victim mentality, they made me do it. He made me do it. No, nobody made you do it. I don't think they tied you up in chains and dragged you to the party. You agreed and said yes. And my guess is you didn't mention to your partner you didn't want to go because you didn't want to disappoint them, because you didn't want them to be mad at you and give you the silent treatment or something, right? So, my therapist rejected me, and then usually I'm like, well, is there something maybe that you might, because it's not, a lot of people who come see me, it's not their first therapy experience. They've already had another therapist. And I always ask, why did your therapy end with your last therapist? I want to know what happened, right? Because whatever happened there that's unresolved, guess who's going to get that? Yours truly. So I'm like, how did it end and why did it end? What happened, And then if they say something like, my therapist rejected me, I'm like, can you tell me more about that, Because that, and then I try to explain, okay, you might have been projecting a mother samskar into your therapist. If you feel in any way that I'm rejecting you, please tell me before so we can talk it through. I'm not rejecting you. I have to make boundaries as a therapist, I can't be on a 1-800 direct dial to you. But so that I have to explain that, because if somebody has that mentality, it's not going to turn out good usually. Okay, so blame and rationalization in a nutshell, right? If I feel bad, your fault. If I feel good, I did it. That's our punchline. So blame our feelings, right? So taking responsibility for how we feel or for something bad that we said or did makes us feel horrible, right? Taking responsibility for how we feel about something where someone's making us feel ashamed and blaming us and pointing at us, it would make us feel, if we actually admitted it, small, wrong, weak, inferior, stupid, ashamed, inadequate. And these come back to, like I said, those childhood feelings. At least what I've uncovered in the therapy work I've done with my clients is it's going back to potty training. It's so young. It's so young. And I'm not saying that's the only thing. It's not that everybody remembers being potty trained. But at some point when your mother or father usually, or sometimes a teacher, some primary caregiver in your life in those very young years, maybe first 7 years or so, made you feel like utterly just ashamed. Like you just want to go in the corner and evaporate, so ashamed for something you did, because these people didn't know how to deal with kids, so usually we're pretty innocent when we're young and we don't purposely do something, right? But the way they get so angry and blame us and make us feel so horrible, that comes up now for something that's pretty minor, like did you spill the milk or something, or something small now, but we'll be like, no, I didn't do it, because we're actually trying to cover. Our ahankara is trying to protect us and cover for the samskara of that very deep shame. So that's why these feelings are challenging and scary to deal with, because they're from the past actually. So that's why we just automatically go, ooh, don't want to feel that again. I'm gonna blame and twist it somehow, that deflect that thing off of me, right? Because it's not easy to admit these painful feelings. And especially this other point I made in point 3, especially if our parents didn't model it for us. Oftentimes when I'm working with people in therapy, we are working through an issue with their mother or father where the parent doesn't take responsibility. You know, where the parent did something to you or didn't do something. They didn't show up for you in your life the way you needed to, the way you needed it, and the way they should have. And they just take no responsibility. They never did in their childhood. Like I had one good friend in high school, and we would always be around her mother, you know, and she would ask her, she lived right down the street, so I'd always be hanging out at her house, you know. And whenever she'd ask her mom, like, can we go here or there? And the mother would be like, no. She just said no every time. And then the friend would say, why not, Mom? And she'd say, just like that. And we would like laugh. We'd go in her room and like laugh for an hour. We're like, who says just like that? What is that? We can't go to the party just like that is the reason? Like, so she would just like, like, you know, it's, anyway, so basically her mother did not model how to be a mature person. And so she ended up, my friend ended up like doing a lot of lying and blaming and rationalizing. And we actually grew apart, you know, because in my family, my dad was very clear. And he would take responsibility. Even if he got mad, afterwards he'd write me a handwritten letter apologizing and saying, I shouldn't have done that. I had a hard day at work. I was very exhausted. Like, I love you very much. He would always do a really nice apology. So I learned and I got modeled to me from both my mother and father how to take responsibility, you know, for your actions, even because nobody's perfect. So even if they would mess up, they would apologize and they'd say, my bad, you know. So that was modeled to me. But if you didn't have that, how are you going to know how to be like that? How are you going to even know there's a mess to clean up, you know? Just like that, okay. So an example of blame and rationalizing. So the situation, right? So the student is late to class, okay? So the blaming part is, it's the traffic, not me. Rationalization, the traffic was so bad today. There must have been some big event in the town, so it made me late. You see how this person is a perfected being and there's nothing, the person did nothing wrong. When I was in high school, I used to be late every day, my senior year, because I already got into college. So I got into college, I was so happy. I was going to this college of my dream in California. It was like so far away from where I grew up in the snow in New Hampshire, you know. So I already had it made. I didn't have to do anything anymore in high school, right? And I didn't want to go. I found it to be very boring, you know. So what I would do is my mom she'd drive us all to school in the morning, but I wouldn't go. I would like hear them laying on the horn in the car, I'd be like, come on, let's go. And I would still be in the bed sleeping. Like, I was like, I don't care, you know, just give me my degree, I'm done. So I was so like checked out, you know. So then what I would do is every morning, like when I would wake up like an hour later, and then I'd be like, oh shoot. And they would not allow you into the school doors unless you brought a letter with a reason why you're late, with your parent's signature. So I'm like, shoot. I mean, I have to finish out, but I got to do something. And my mom wasn't there, my dad was at work. So what I would do is I would write the letter myself. Dear, you know, Jessica Richmond is late today. Once again, because she's having car troubles, and please excuse her. And then I would get in the old days, when I was in high school, they had the checks returned. They would return the checks, you know, from the bank with my mom's signature. So I would go and I'd find her return check. I'd hold it up to the window so I could get the light, and I'd hold the letter over and sign her perfect signature. Then I'd get on my bike and I'd bike to school, because there's no car. I didn't have a car. So then I would get there and I go, hi. It's the same lady at the front desk every time. I'd be like, hi. And I'd give her the letter. And she'd be like, again, car troubles? I said, yeah, again, you know. Every day I did it. And she's like, you have been late 13 days in a row. You can't keep being late, you know. And she goes, what is the problem with you? And I said, I don't know. Like, we're getting the car fixed, you know. I was just lying, you know. So then, this is my blaming and rationalizing, you know. So then, then one day, she's coming out and she saw me out at the bike rack, like locking up my bike, you know. And I think I even had the letter like in my mouth, like running, my hair was wet, like going, you know. And she goes, Jessica, you've been saying you have car troubles all along. You've been riding your bike. And I said, well, that's the trouble. And she went, what? He said, that is it. That is it. You are scheduled up. Scheduled up means you have to go sit in this room like a jail, you know. Anyway, luckily I graduated. She goes, that's the trouble? I said, yeah, the trouble is I don't have a car. And she goes, oh my God, you liar. And anyway. But I did a good rationalization. You know, I blamed the car. So anyway, that worked for me for 13 days. Okay. So blaming involves also not only blaming a person, but blaming like your feelings, you know. If you don't have the skill set on how to take care of your own feelings, and you don't have the intelligence that your feelings come from inside of you, you know, not from you made me do it, you made me feel it. They're all inside of us. Then we say things like this. I wrote all different feelings that I hear regularly as a client. You know, I made you feel hurt. I made you feel angry. I made you feel judged. I made you feel scared. You know, you made me feel these things. No, I didn't make you feel those. You felt that by an interaction we had, but it's not my fault. You know, it's not my fault. Like we had a conversation, and you could say, I felt angry when you said that. That's different. I'm going to own my feeling. I felt angry when you said that, you know, but I'm not making you do anything, you know. So this is if somebody's emotionally kind of immature and they don't know that it's inside them and that they have to own it and they have to deal with it. And then if you're in a emotionally intimate, safe relation, then you could choose to share that with the person and then also ask them, can we meet and talk about this? When you said that, it made me feel, you know, I felt. And that may not be every single time. Some people love to do this so much that their partner is just feeling suffocated. Like, I don't want to talk about your feelings anymore, you know? It's kind of like I always use caretaking your own feelings is the same thing as it's your job also to take care of your bathroom needs, going to the bathroom, right? So how many times in a day you're going to tell your partner, like, oh, I did pee-pee? It's like, who cares? You do pee-pee 5 times a day. I don't need to hear about it. So it's not something you regularly want to be talking about, like how your, you know, partner made you feel this and this and this. You know, that's a sign of a wounded inner child that needs to be nurtured on your own. Okay? So how to remain peaceful, right? We've heard a lot of blaming. We blame, but also people blame us. So here's some ideas that you could do, right? So know that if they're blaming you, most likely they have problems in these areas of their life, right? Their own mental health. They have problems with human relations because nobody really feels very close to somebody who's always blaming them, right? So they probably are pretty lonely. They aren't connecting to anybody. They probably don't have a very big ability to introspect because otherwise they'd be able to take responsibility for their side and not blame. They also probably don't have very much empathy going on because if they have empathy, they're not going to blame you, right? And they also don't have the ability to take responsibility for problems that they cause. And they probably don't have the ability to sincerely apologize for the mistakes that they make either. Because what they want in their maybe unconscious mind, but is to blame you and then have you say, oh my God, I made you feel angry, I'm so sorry. And guess what? I'm so bad. I am so bad. Because remember, it's the shame that they have they're projecting onto you that they don't realize. The part of themselves that's the bad side, the devil in them, the part that they hate and are ashamed of, they're projecting that onto you unconsciously. They're not purposely doing it. But then the music to their ears is if you say, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have made you feel that way. That's what they want to hear, you know? And then they're like, phew, you know, I'm the angel, nothing wrong with me, and you're bad, and you did these bad things to me. And there's people who operate like that, and they get pretty far actually in this world because the softer-hearted people always kind of cave to them and go, oh, you're right, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have done that, I didn't mean, and then you walk on eggshells around them, right? Like, I don't want to upset that person again, so they rise to the top of the organization by doing that, you know? Okay. So why is it helpful to know? Why is that information helpful to know if somebody blames you? Why is this helpful to know? Yes, Mohini.
To protect myself, and also what we said last week, to not confront them.
Yeah, exactly. Right? To not confront and then protect yourself. Both of those go together, right? Because if you don't confront, that's how you're protecting. Very good. Bhushan?
I think the path of spirituality entails changing oneself. As long as you blame external situations, we don't take responsibility of them, so not much is going to change.
Yeah. Yep. So on this path of spirituality, right, if you don't take responsibility for yourself, then not much is going to change. Very good. Any other reason why this might be helpful for you, Vilas?
So I'm not sure if this was already included in Mohini's response, but with the protection of myself. So if someone blames me and I'm more soft-hearted and I feel like, oh, no, it was my bad, then you know, I might be drawn to take responsibility for things that I didn't do, and allow the other person to continue to operate in that way, and also harm myself, right? That I now overstep my boundaries, or that I have disadvantages because now I'm trying to satisfy the emotional needs of the other person, and these emotional needs are unrealistic or inappropriate.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Very good.
I think that's what
Yeah.
she said in Sutra.
Yeah, but it's adding to it. Yeah, you can get sucked into their dark hole of whatever it is they've got going on, and that's how they control. And then everyone's like, "Oh, well, no, I don't." Nobody wants to tell that person no, basically, because they kind of like freaked out and bit you once in a way, or hissed at you, or scared you, or got angry at you, and you're like, "Ooh, I don't want to confront that person." So the whole mood of the place is like, "Yeah, don't upset that person. Just don't rock the apple cart with that person," you know. But then that person ends up being like a monster, right? Because then they start controlling everybody with that bad behavior, and nobody gives them the direct feedback that that's not okay, you know? Because if you do, how's that going to go for you? You know, it's not going to be nice. So it's a tricky situation. So the idea is protect yourself, but also be smart about it. You know, don't blur your boundaries and try to just be so nice to them that now you're spending 24 hours with them, or you're doing something way out of what's appropriate for you and healthy. You know, so that's good. Anyone else?
Yes, Joshika. I think it also allows you to introspect your own self little more deeply. And why, okay, this person is blaming me, whatever his reasons are, but at least I should be very careful and cautious not to deal this kind of people, or to develop better human relationship in this way.
Yeah, that's very good. So it's an ability, it gives you a chance to introspect more, right, on yourself. Very good. A couple more?
So, if you don't remain peaceful, you kind of lose the option to control the situation, right? And depending on who it is, it might be better if you are able to also manipulate the other person by just taking the steam out of the situation.
Yeah, that's true. If they trigger you enough, then you lose your cool, and then that's what they love. Then it's like, ooh, I got them. That's another way they control, is that you lose your cool, you know? Very good.
I was also thinking, like, if you know the game, then you also you don't become a part of that game, and that gives also a chance that the other person who is doing that he may have a mature gegenüber, how do you say gegenüber? Opposite, that a dialogue can be born.
Could be. Or he just might find someone else to bite. Usually that's what they do. Because thinking that person might change because you pull back, they may change in their relationship to you, but only because they know that they can't bite you. Like you put the mosquito repellent on, so they know, oh, if I bite, it's not gonna taste good. You know, I won't get the reaction I want. But they probably aren't gonna actually change, because then that'd be amazing actually if they did, wouldn't it be? If we just kind of ignore somebody or something, or pull back, and then all of a sudden that person gets a big insight and changes, I think it'd be wonderful if it works that way. And maybe in some cases it does. I haven't experienced it yet, but maybe. Okay, Norton?
I would say it could also help develop cognitive empathy towards oneself. For instance, when I start blaming or rationalizing, I may just make a pause and think why I'm doing this now, and probably find the reason or the cause wounds, childhood wounds, and then just nourish my inner child. And when someone blames me or rationalizes, instead of going into a conflict, I may just try to put myself in the shoes of this person, and probably just try to understand what's happening with him or her, and then try to find a different solution to this peculiar situation, and probably then go beyond and find a different way to empathize with the person.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, and Shri?
So I think it's important to know about it. It's important to know about it so that unconsciously we don't fall into that shame feeling that we have shame, and this person can make us feel
Yes.
shame
Yeah.
about it.
Yep. And actually, if they're doing it as an adult, they've probably been doing it for a long time, and they know how to. They're expert. They're expert at making, like saying or doing the exact thing to trigger that in you, because that's how they get love and attention, basically. So that means we have to be an expert of a detector, like beep, 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 a little detector going off when we're around somebody who's doing that. So we can kind of pull ourselves back, be polite and respectful and kind, but not open and not ready to like explain ourselves and, defend ourselves or take their feelings. Oh no, I made them upset. That's their job to take care of their feelings, Vilas?
Could you give some helpful examples of reacting to blame? Some practical examples?
Yes, that's what we're going to do. So when someone blames you, do not get defensive. Don't try to explain yourself. Don't try to educate them. Do you guys know what it means when I say educate them? What's an example of that? Who knows what that means when I say don't try to educate them? If somebody blames you, don't try to educate them. What does that mean? Vilas?
What I understand is something like, look, I think you're currently blaming me, probably because, in your childhood, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
I think your mother really didn't attune well.
Yeah. Your mother didn't attune to you, and I think you probably have, I just learned in class about the shame thing. Did you have a problem with your potty training? Or analyzing them, psychoanalyzing them, explaining to them, educating them. That is the last thing they want to hear.
And I also know your mother. Yeah, I know her personally, and I know how she is. So therefore, I can see it why it comes, why you're doing this.
Yeah, exactly, right? So educating. They don't want to be educated, and we have to use this as an introspection tool. Why do we have such an urge to educate if you have that tendency? What is going on with you that you need to educate somebody else who, number one, they didn't ask you. And number two, even if they did, they're probably not going to listen. They're probably going to debate you, So that's a good way to introspect and go, what is going on with me that I have such a desire that I just can't let it be and be like, oh, that's how they are. That's just how they are, instead of being like, no, I've got to explain it. Don't attempt to change their mind or even have a hope that you can change their mind. That's why I was saying for you, Mohini, you're like, oh, maybe that they'll, I would just drop that expectation. One day, by God's grace, if somebody actually really had an authentic change in their mind by some interaction with one of us, by making a boundary, that'd be amazing. But don't expect it, don't hope for it, don't even let it be in your anywhere. Try to eradicate that, because then life gets a lot easier. Then you can just do you. Then you just make your nice boundary and you say, thank you, Haribol, I'm so sorry that you're feeling angry and whatever, but not a dialogue about it, Don't let them, because we often, that's what gets us hooked. We're trying to change their mind and they won't change. And so we keep going with it. We keep going. We keep trying to get them to change. And then we think we're going to get a relief when finally they change. And the worst part is sometimes they do just enough to hook us in, to make us believe that they changed. And as soon as we come back close to them again, they slap us again with the same complaint. And you're like, what? I worked so hard to get you to see it this way, and now you're twisting it back again? That's one of their tricks, so it's better to just not get implicated. So that was the fifth point. Don't make any efforts to caretake their feelings. That's their job. And don't feel guilty like it was your fault. That's our own samskara that we have to work on and go, hold on, that's an old thing. It's not, and also, we may have guilt around maybe in our childhood if we had siblings, and if we were older and we did something, maybe our parents said, he's little or she's little, don't hurt him. You hurt your sister, you hurt your brother. If the parent blames you, you take that as a very deep thing. So now as an adult, when someone says, you hurt me, that can trigger the samskara of shame, like, oh, I was a bully, to my younger sisters or brothers, and I'm a bully now. So try not to get tricked by someone else doing that to you as an adult. Okay, so that's what not to do. And here's what to do. When someone blames you, you want to just briefly acknowledge their feelings. You don't want to ignore them. You want to acknowledge. You can say, oh, I see you're feeling really angry right now. And then you kind of say, I something nice, like, I hope that you can work through it. It looks like you're having a hard time. And then, Haribol. If you sit there, that's another thing. Oftentimes when I'm teaching people this technique, what they do is they get the concept, and then they get in the situation with somebody who does this to them, and then they'll say the right thing, and then their body language doesn't match, and then they sit there. And I'm like, your words and your body language have to match. So if you say, I am sorry to see that you're having a hard time and you're feeling that way. I wish you the best working through that. you know, then you have to, your body language has to match, and then you have to say Hari Bol, and then you have to go, get up and go. If you sit there with them, then your words just sound like nothing. Your words are just like, they're not going to take your words seriously. If you're on the phone, then you have to say, or if you're texting, then you have to stop engaging, you know, with that dialogue. Because your words will sound very cheap if you say that and you don't get up and leave, or if you don't, or if you keep writing back and forth on text, or if you stay on the phone, you know what I mean? So your words have to be congruent with your behavior, and that's how they'll take you more seriously. And that sends a signal to end that thing, you know? So we didn't get time to do the blame game today, but I'll start next week with that. Yes, Malika. Yeah.
So I noticed that some characteristics, they of all the ahankara characteristics, some of them I find they are more applying to me than others, or some parts of them they are more applying than others. So I was wondering, so is it that everyone has all the characteristics to a certain different degree, or yeah, actually that's the question.
Yeah,
or how it's.
That's how it behaves, you know. But you have to figure out the ones that actually really are like, ooh, those are mine, you know. Probably at some point it's doing some of those things at some point in your life, you know. But then there's going to be some prominent, like predominant ones, you know. And you're like, oh, my ahankara is really expert at this one, you know. And some you'll be like, I don't really resonate with that. That could be one thing, or the other thing could be, you're only aware of some of the things that, right? And then there's other ones and you're like, I don't do that at all. And then it's like, okay, talk to your close friends who are willing to tell you the truth. That's why for ahankara it's very helpful to talk to other people who are studying it and ask them, what do you see? If you're friendly with them, you know, and you could each say, I'll tell you one characteristic that I don't think I have. Can you tell me if you see this in me at all? You know, ask your friend. Then you can have an idea. But I think it's probably a mix, that some of it you really probably don't have very much of that, and some of it is either it's just not predominant now, or it is predominant but you're not aware of it. Those are some different ideas, but you can experiment with it. It's a good question. Anything else?
How to experiment?
Do what I just said. So look at the list and then ask somebody who's close to you and say, "This, I don't think I have this one. I don't really see it in my life. You know me pretty well. Do you see it?" You know, and if they're like, "Yeah, I see it," then say, "Give me an example. I need something concrete." And they'll say, "Oh, it's like, you remember that time this and this? That's what I think you do." And then go, "Okay," and now then experiment, like watch yourself over the week and see if you're doing it. And ask that person, "Can you watch me over the week too when we're interacting? Do you see it? Keep telling me." Because the whole idea is to raise our level of awareness of some of this stuff that's so subtle, you know? So you could experiment that way. Did you have something?
At the beginning of the class, you gave some examples of like situations where you might get blamed, like you gave some context. And I was wondering if you could like refresh us on like the context of being blamed, because I'm like looking at this right now, I'm like, well, what if I did do something wrong and then someone's blaming me, and then I'm just like, oh, like I understand you're angry, like Haribol. Like wish them well and then move on. It's like I'm trying to remember some of the examples you gave for like the context of being blamed. Okay, so there's two things. One is the examples, but the other thing you're bringing up is, what if you do want to take responsibility and you do feel like, right? Yeah. Yeah. So that's different. So these ones are things where, like what I was. That's a good point, though. I didn't give examples of if you actually did do the thing and you're aware of it. So what I'm saying is, if somebody's kind of like attacking you for something that you're like, this is unfounded, there's something wrong with this, or they have a chronic pattern of blaming you. That's kind of what this lecture was. But just to answer that question real quick, if you're like, oh, I did do that, then you'd have a different response. You wouldn't be like, oh, sorry you feel bad, sucks for you, Haribol. Instead, you would say something like, thank you so much for pointing that out, actually, my bad. So it's like a situation where like, I'm remembering now one of the examples was like a man hitting a woman. It's like, where it's like you're getting blamed for bringing that anger out in them.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it's not actually it's like their.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but that's a very good question. There's a different way to approach it if it's your bad. That's why the example I gave with my father, you know, if he did do something that was not right, he would apologize later. You know, even if we didn't bring it up because we were just kids, he would apologize later. We would wake up in the morning, we'd have a handwritten note taped on our door. And he would say what he did and why and how he's so sorry, you know. So that taught us about that piece. So yeah. Did you want to ask something?
What if I do something bad and somebody says that to me and I accept it and somehow I try to apologize, but then I don't know if I'm like feeling like a victim, I'm acting like a victim. Oh, I did something bad, I'm such a bad person. What then?
I'd say you have to introspect more before you apologize. Don't be too quick to apologize. You know, if they say it in the moment, say, thank you so much for your feedback. You can say, I'm sorry, you know, but then think about it. Like actually take some time, because in the moment it's hard if somebody confronts you and then you just want to say, I'm sorry. So you don't want to go down that road of beating yourself up that you're a bad person, but you don't want to go down that road either of like taking no responsibility. So the best thing is in the moment say something kind and nice, but if you're not quite sure and you feel like you're getting negative about it, you can journal about it and say, why am I feeling so bad? Like write about it, talk to somebody about it, try to process your feelings and separate your feelings from the actual other person's stuff. And when your feelings calm down and you've pacified yourself and you're like, okay, I feel clear now, then you can go and apologize in a way that's kind of safe, that's not too much one way or the other, you know. Okay, we better go. Babaji's coming. Thank you guys very much. Haribo.